throughout the region of the 284 that are still outstanding. And so those board members that have the one or two in their area, you've got the sheet, and any help that you can give would be appreciated. As you know, it does allow us not only to continue to fund our operations, but it is an important part of how we pay for the PL program. So any help we can get there is greatly appreciated. And a big thanks to everybody who has paid. Also want to let you know that I did a keynote address at the Calumet Area Industrial Commission. It was their kickoff luncheon for the year on February 21st. Spoke about the 2050 plan, and in particular prioritizing infrastructure investments, supporting inclusive growth, and big one down in the Southland, modernizing tax policies. Also was invited to testify out in Washington, D.C. before the Senate Commerce Committee on our nation's freight needs. Spoke both as a representative of CMAP, as the freight hub of the nation, as well as a board member for CAGIT, Coalition America's Gateways and Trade Corridors. And the entire focus was the importance of freight to the nation and our intermodal connections. I stress the importance for a mode-neutral, performance-based investment approach. And the big thing was eliminating the arbitrary cap that they have today on multimodal freight programs. It's capped at 10% for non-highway. Big push on lifting that cap and just allowing the very best projects, whatever mode they are, to rise up to the top. While I was out there, I had a chance to do some meet and greets, some visits. Got to see our newest STB board member, Marty Oberman, and it was good to see Marty in his Washington, D.C. office as the newest STB member. Also spoke with the vice chairman of the STB. Had a conversation on the importance of good data, for rail operations in the region to help us do a better job of performance-based programming, and got a great deal of interest from not only Patrick at the STB, but also from FRA staff and CAGIT members in the work that CMAP is doing to better prioritize grade crossing separations. And so they want to learn more about our work on that and see what opportunities there may be to inform that on a more federal level. Back home here in Chicago, had a chance to do a presentation to the Civic Committee. Thank you, Frank, for the invitation to do that presentation that Jesse and the team did on the Expressway Vision for the Commercial Club Civic Committee, and good feedback. We're starting to make the rounds with the draft on that, and just kind of cataloging and listening to the feedback that we get from folks. So again, thank you, Frank, for the feedback from the business leaders. And then lastly, CMAP had a chance to testify in Springfield last week on March 7th. Jesse covered that one for the team and testified in front of the House Appropriations on Capital Committee about the need for a capital bill. And of course, we emphasized our core principles, that it be funded in a way that is flexible, sustainable, fair, and equitable. Mr. Chairman, that is my report.
Thanks. Any questions of Joe? Moving on, Angela, do you have the contracts or procurements?
Good morning, Board. I have one contract. At your place, you should have a revised resolution. Two changes in the resolution at your place. First one being the removal of the mention of an intergovernmental agreement with the replacement of a not-for-profit database subscription agreement. And the second change is just the notation of a database subscription as opposed to GIS information. We made the changes because this year the Cook County Assessor's Office advised us that we are considered non-for-profit for the purpose of we're not a taxing body, we're not a municipal entity in that respect by their definition. And also Cook County Assessors as a unit of government and not being a government entity can no longer enter into governmental agreements. So for purposes of getting this data, we're denoted as non-for-profit, and we're entering into an agreement as opposed to an intergovernmental agreement. So today, I'm seeking board approval on a resolution that would allow CMAP to enter into a non-for-profit database subscription agreement with the Cook County Assessor's Office for tax data for year 2017. I'm seeking approval for that
Is there a
today.
motion? Moved and seconded. Any questions regarding that? Any changes? If not, all those in favor signify by a vote of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, vote of no, and the motion carries.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Moving on. Under the committee reports, Frank?
Our recording committee. Grant.
Comments or questions on the committee report? Frank, thank you. We're moving along here under item 7. That's under the two regional significant project amendments. One first being for the support of and the update of the South Lakefront Framework Plan. Jesse, you want to give an overview of that?
I do. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. So I think, as you know, part of what we did in On to 2050 is develop a priority list of regionally significant projects, and that's one of the things that you have to do in developing a plan as a metropolitan planning organization. We do have to update that plan at least every 4 years, but we also have a process outside of that to consider new regionally significant process as amendments as requested by project sponsors. So this morning, staff is recommending that the board consider and approve 2 plan amendment requests from the City of Chicago that I'm going to walk through in this agenda item and then the next agenda item. So I'll go over the process really quick. Once the requests were received back at the end of last year, staff evaluated the projects using the same techniques and metrics that were originally used in On to 2050. Then the results of that analysis were written up in memos that were then released for a 30-day public comment period between the end of January and the end of February. Based on the evaluation staff did and then the feedback that we received, we drafted staff recommendations for those 2 amendment requests that are in your packet today for your consideration. So the first project, which is the roadway improvements to support the update to the South Lakefront Framework Plan. It's kind of a mouthful. It's a package of improvements basically in and around Jackson Park. On its merits, this project meets a number of On to 2050's transportation goals. For one, it helps address current local needs, particularly improving circulation through Jackson Park for both automobiles as well as non-motorized users, as well as making some needed safety improvements. It helps implement complete streets, it improves walkability, and it would make some improvements to transit that are focused on increasing bus speed and reliability, both of which are major goals of our plan's focus on making transit more competitive. We also think those bus improvements, which are on Stony Island mostly, really represent, the process used really represents a good example of agencies working together to prioritize transit improvements as part of and early on in the highway engineering process. So it's a good example from a process standpoint. Besides that, the project would also help meet recommendations in other areas of On to 2050, not just the mobility sections. For one thing, some of the improvements in the park itself relate to stormwater management. They would enhance water quality from roadway runoff that is currently being directed into the lagoons in Jackson Park. On to 2050 also encourages reinvesting in disinvested communities, such as the neighborhoods around Jackson Park, so this helps from that standpoint. And then, of course, the project will also help prepare Jackson Park for the traffic impacts, traffic demands, I should say, from the new Obama Presidential Center. We received a low volume of public comments on this project. One of those comments was in favor of it. 3 of the comments that we received really talked about transit improvements other than the improvements that are listed in the project itself, and then two other commenters were opposed to the project. We would note that the Chicago Department of Transportation has done a lot of engagement on this particular project in the community around Jackson Park as it was designing the project. It's going through preliminary engineering. In terms of how this impacts the plan's financial element, this has a relatively small effect on the financial plan. It's small in comparison to the overall need and revenue estimates that we project out over 32 years. It also amounts to a small reallocation of funds from one category, systematic enhancements in the financial plan, to the regionally significant projects category. In effect, it really doesn't represent a major new investment outside of what the plan was already contemplating. So with all that, with the close fit of this project, in staff's opinion, with Honda 2050 and its minor impact on the plan's financial element, staff is recommending that you approve adding this project as an amendment to the plan.
We'll take these one at a time, so I'll entertain a motion to approve, or as to the recommendation to approve item 7.1. Are there questions on that? If not, all those in favor signify by a vote of aye. Those opposed, vote no. The motion carries.
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry. Oh, I'll entertain a motion. Who was the first? So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. No further questions. The chair will call the roll again. All those in favor signify by a vote of aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, vote of no, and the motion carries.
Aye.
Just trying to move you along, Jess, that's all.
I appreciate it. All right, so here we are on the next project. So same deal with this. The O'Hare Express service, which also is in a memo in your packet, would provide a new transit-like link between O'Hare and downtown. It would use mid-size electric vehicles, which are estimated at 16 passenger electric vehicles, to ferry passengers through two 17.5-mile tunnels. Travel time is proposed to be approximately 12 minutes each way, and the fare would be somewhere between $20 and $30. The alignment for this project would run largely along Elston Avenue and then along the Kennedy Expressway to the airport, although near downtown the route hasn't been completely finalized. The project is being developed through a public-private partnership, and the way that came about is the Chicago Infrastructure Trust and the City of Chicago together went through a procurement process early last year that resulted in negotiations with the Boring Company to design, build, finance, operate, and maintain the project. And the procurement documents from the get-go stipulated that the project would have to be developed and operated at no cost to the city. So going to the merits on this project, one of Honda 2050's transportation recommendations is that the region harness emerging technology to break ground, or to improve travel. I believe that this project does provide a unique opportunity to break ground in emerging mobility. It is certainly innovative, and bringing private capital to help meet public needs is something that the region should encourage. The project would also connect two of the region's biggest economic powerhouses, O'Hare Airport and the Loop, and that supports the plan's focus on investing in existing communities and building on our economic strengths. Also, with O'Hare modernization, we can expect more demand for trips to the airport, which, of course, this project would help accommodate. So this project, as proposed, would provide benefits to the region. It's also not expected to require public money in order to get those benefits. But with an innovative project like this, that's got engineering challenges still ahead of it, we do need to have confidence as a region that what's in the plan is what gets built. And Honda 2050 also supports the strategic use of public-private partnerships, as long as they don't leave the public on the hook for any downside of a deal. So with that in mind, we recommend a couple of checks on the amendment that are explained in more detail in the memo. That includes that any changes in the transportation improvement program listing for this project, which is our short-range program of projects that are being done in the region. We recommend that any changes to that listing come to the policy committee for consideration. Usually those just go to a lower committee here at CMAP. And then also any significant change in the scope or adding public funding to this project needs to come back for reconsideration by this body as well as by the MPO policy committee. So staff's recommendation is that the O'Hare Express project should be added to the plan as a constrained project. We did receive public comments on this one, more public comments on this one than on the Jackson Park project. The comments tended to focus on concerns about the project, some of which we believe we're addressing through the checks that we proposed. Since this is not proposed to use public money, it has no effect on the financial element of the plan. And making this amendment will encourage innovation and private investment in the transportation system, while also protecting the public interest through the checks we include in the recommendation. So staff's suggestion is that we vote to include this as an amendment in the plan.
Before I ask for a motion, comments or questions regarding this proposal?
Chairman, I would just, I will reiterate a little bit about what I said at our last meeting. I feel like the staff has done a great job setting out some of the more technical benefits of the plan as far as how it addresses anticipated capacity issues along that corridor with our O'Hare expansion program. I would just, again, emphasize that we shouldn't underestimate the reputational benefits of being associated with this project for purposes of the city's brand and view of innovation, and for purposes of recruiting additional investment in other businesses. And I actually think, that's the case in spite of any unpredictability you might view in Elon Musk, and perhaps even because of it, I'm not sure, but it exists. And I actually think for any concern that might be levied against it, this notion that at some point they're going to ask for public funding or that the technology won't work, it's much better for our reputation that the project ultimately doesn't happen, or that the city changes its mind for one of those substantive reasons down the road, than for the concept that we can't stomach continuing with a NEPA investigatory process. I would also just add, from my perspective, I think the concerns that have been raised really fall into two general categories. The first, I think, is an entirely understandable misunderstanding of how governments operate. So, for example, the notion that we shouldn't proceed with our review because the city hasn't worked out the final terms of the deal. As the city has stated, as is the case, whenever they come to those terms, they have to present it to their city council for review and a potential approval by that body, and for a public debate on that topic. It's just not where we are yet on this project. It's not what they're requesting of us either. Same concept with the sort of concern about this competing either for staff attention or for resources with other public transit investments. And I can tell you again, the team that works on CTA investments, that comes from CTA capital planning. I'm not saying that CTA that CDOT isn't involved, but it's primarily driven by CTA capital planning and by our teams that are soliciting investment from the federal government. So despite, even if the infrastructure judge wasn't involved, and if a lot of the staff attention hadn't been working there is sort of a principal fact, and maybe this is not the case in some of our other regional governments, but in the city of Chicago at any rate, there are 1,000 things going on at any one moment, and there's no marginal difference between adding one or two. You just have to manage that, and you have to try to do as much as you can across a whole host of projects. And I will just deliver what I think is what I am anticipating would be the bad news, that one way or the other, we're not going to get as much federal funding for those CTA projects as we have been. And there's an amazing stat that Dorval Carter has been giving that I've forgotten, and maybe the commissioner knows, about the amount of investment we've put in the last 8 years in our CTA lines compared to, I think it's the prior 50 years. But I don't mean this as a attack on either of our two mayoral candidates, but no one is going to be as good at that as Mayor Emanuel was. So we are actually going to reduce that one way or the other. Is my downer of a note on that front. I will say that the sort of second bucket of concerns that I hear, I think, is a little more distressing to me, and because in my experience, it seems to be a little bit of an increasing trend, and it's the notion that identifying any potential obstacle or risk associated with an endeavor is reason enough not to try it. And I think we see that more and more, and nothing of any significance or merit by the public agencies anyway has been accomplished without some element of risk and challenge and things that you have to work through. And the notion, take for example, even within public transit, do you really think that the RPA, the red purple modernization, the $1 billion plus investment we did, had no risk involved? We rebuilt the entire Red Line South. We closed the Red Line for something like 4 months. You think there was no risk involved or obstacles with that? Same thing with the O'Hare expansion. So the notion that I can spot an issue and identify for you a risk, and that means we should stop everything we're doing, I think is a really dangerous one for the city and for our region. And I think in the context of this deal, I'm a relatively young man still. I know a lot of you, I my colleagues on this board have been involved in government for longer than I have. I will say I have been involved in almost every project of significance in the city of Chicago at any rate in the last 8 or 9 years. I have never seen one where the risks have been so carefully minimized and addressed. So at some point, either we're the city of, and the region of big shoulders, and that makes no little plans, or we're not, and we should just stop saying that and content ourselves with a very different outlook in the sort of competitive landscape that is the city and or the country and the world. So I think for all those reasons, certainly for the small request that's been made of this body to continue with the NEPA process, it would be anathema not to do it. And I actually think for the rest of the project, this is really worth doing. And I think it would be a major coup. And I think there are a lot of other cities in the country that are continuing to attempt. They're trying to compete for this kind of attention in this potential project.
I would think you would find most of the board would agree with, in principle, about what you're talking about. That's what this agency's for. That's why we sit here unless they decide the final dollars, because that's going to come from the agencies who submit their proposals to us. But certainly as an agency with a vision for this metropolitan area, I don't think anybody would disagree with your comments regarding that. If there's any distrust, obviously, because of people maybe not doing their homework, there's a vast majority of citizens out there who have gotten a bad taste on public-private partnerships or public-private ventures, and because of that, there's going to have to be a cleansing period of a rebuild of trust we have going on right now in the state of Illinois, potentially talk about the sale of the tollway authority. So there's if I always say you do your due diligence and lay out the facts as to what short-term, long-term is going to take place. Hopefully that works out. But obviously, because of some bad history, there's obviously some mistrust out there. Any other comments or questions? If not, all those in favor, signify by is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved in second. Any further questions? All in favor, signify by a vote of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, vote no. Motion carries. Thanks, Jesse. Moving on. Here's my agenda.
Number 8. Todd, you can work your way up while the
I'm sorry.
chairman gets his agenda. Otherwise, I'll give you mine.
Yeah. Oh, we're on pavement management. Todd? Yes.
Thank you. Good morning. Today I'm going to give you an update on CMAP's Municipal Pavement Management project. CMAP is currently working with 12 communities in the region to complete pavement management plans. These plans support and advance prioritized investments in infrastructure, one of the 3 core principles in ON2 2050. A pavement management plan is a tool that can optimize the life cycle costs of maintaining roads. Over the long term, these plans can improve the condition of the network by moving communities away from worst first to a more strategic target investment strategy that extends the life of pavements through preservation and maintenance. The pilot round of 12 communities will be complete by the end of this fiscal year, and the communities, one from each council of mayors, have been working with consultants to collect and review current pavement condition data and maintenance activities. This information will be used to develop customized plans with alternative cost scenarios that achieve a desired network level pavement condition. Last summer, CMAP was awarded a statewide planning and research grant, or SPR grant, for MIDOT to expand our small pilot project. In a couple of weeks, we'll be kicking off our next round of plans using the SPR grant funds. As part of the expanded project, AECOM was hired to assist with the project management oversight of the plans and to help find cost efficiencies throughout the project. CMAP will continue to use the same pavement consultants, and staff will select the communities from the pool of over 60 communities that applied for the pilot project. Communities will be prioritized based on need, whether they have a pavement management plan, and geographic mix. Budgetary factors such as the size of the municipality in terms of lane miles will also be considered. The SBR grant ends in 2021, and staff plans to complete as many pavement management plans as possible. Throughout the course of the project, CMAP will continue to promote the ON2 2050 core principle of prioritized investments through this project and other decision support tools. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, comments? In general, I mean, out there in the real world, I think many towns have initiated, our own management plans 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, using crack sealing, et cetera, to get further longevity out of a road. Are you already seeing that in place out there?
It's a really mixed bag. We see some communities actively engaging on it and doing crack sealing and throwing some rejuvenation down on their roads, and some folks just are not doing it at all. And the purpose of this is also, to promote that and also prioritize your investments. So I think it's a mixed bag, and it really is educating a lot of folks on the importance of preservation.
Mary?
Yeah, just for the additional communities, will those be selected from the initial applicants?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And have you determined that yet, or is that still to be determined?
We have determined the first round, and we're working on the second and third rounds.
Okay. For the second and third rounds, when do you expect to have those lists available?
The list should be available in the coming weeks. Right now, we're still reaching out to the first round communities to see if they're still interested.
Okay.
We're waiting to hear back from, I think, 3 communities.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You want? Thank you, Todd. Sir, Mayor?
Not currently. I think we're just looking at asphalt and concrete. But we're really leaving it up to the municipality on what they want to see in these plans, because we really want them to take this and use this in the future for work. So.
Mayor, again, another good point I think I brought up a few years back. Unfortunately, IDOT controls all those type of materials. Even our local roads, we can't go out to bid unless it's an IDOT-approved material. But I agree, and I am constantly bombarded too. I'm sure some of the other mayors here with different new techniques that are out there for longevity and the type of material that's being used. And I don't know IDOT's, unless we approach IDOT and find out from their standpoint how much research do they do annually on new products coming to the market. But they're the ones that make final approval. Well, I would hope that I hope they're out there being innovative and looking at the new products that are out there.
Maybe there are, I don't want to propose to
Yeah.
a community to not be
I agree.
regional.
Who at IDOT would do that? Yeah, I guess from our standpoint, maybe staff can reach out to IDOT, whatever section of IDOT is in research or development or approval of materials, to kind of talk to them. Where are they right now in the 21st century with the new products that are out there, and how extensive they test it? So maybe we can initiate.
We'll see what we can learn.
Come back with some report as to how they go about even doing that, testing the products.
Right, and I think this is new for IDOT too, so I think they're going through a process also.
One last comment about crack sealing. Come of age, and you always get residents saying, "Well, my street looks like a city of Chicago street with all the crack sealing."
Hey.
And I said, "Hey, I grew up in the city; it was not a problem." But you're finding that now, even in some, as I drive through some of the more so-called affluent communities, they have no choice. They have no choice to use that, as we've all spent and wasted, I think, a lot of money on seal coating streets, which last a year or two. Crack sealing has been a remarkable thing. But again, it's an aesthetic thing. You're now playing with people who don't like to see their street that way. So be it. Thanks, Todd.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to
Number 9, legislative update.
Oh, my favorite thing, yeah. Gordon?
You always introduce me as your favorite thing, and that's kind of weird, but that's okay. Good morning, Mayor. At your place is the legislative report, and the staff is recommending that you take 5 support positions on some bills. And I'd like to just give you a little highlight of those 5 particular bills, and then give you on the second half of my report, just kind of give you an update of what's going on at the state level from, I will say, my and the staff's perspective. The first bill that we have before you is House Bill 825, which is a stormwater disposal bill. It basically expands the municipal code definition of sewerage system to include stormwater infrastructure and allows non-home rule communities to apply charges. We think that's just something that's right out of onto 2050 that communities have the ability to pay for the services that they are providing. The second bill is House Bill 2217. And this particular bill authorizes the Cook County Assessor's Office to require commercial property owners to annually submit income and expense data to be used in the assessment process. And what this will do is basically bring the assessor's office in line with other comparable regions' assessors' activities. And this bill also allows other counties within the state to opt in if their board so chooses to do so. House Bill 2053 is basically just an electrical vehicle licensing fee increase. And again, that just seems to make sense. They're not paying their fair share. I shouldn't say they're not paying their fair share. Electric vehicles have been subsidized since they've been online. And on to 2050 basically talks about those that use the road should be paying their fair share, and this brings that more in line with that principle. House Bill 2823 is a bill that you all have annually supported. It's an RTA cash working notes legislation. It is our understanding, and I'll look to Leanne, it is our understanding that the House version of that bill is the one that's advancing and that they're putting their support behind. So again, we are seeking your support for that bill to move out of committee. And finally, Senate Bill 198. This amends the highway code to allow counties, townships, road districts, and municipalities to use MFT funds for public transit operating costs, bike, pedestrian, and transit mobility improvements, and electric vehicle infrastructure. And so with that, I am seeking the board's approval for support of those 5 pieces of legislation.
Gordon, a couple of items. The last one, for example, is that outside the regulation of the lockbox?
So that is questionable. We don't believe it is. We think that is within, we think they have the ability to do that now. This just puts clarification on that.
Second, on the increase in the state vehicle registration for hybrids, was a study done on that and based upon what they calculated what an average car may pay in motor fuel taxes? Because obviously that's going to be a huge component if and when they come up with a capital bill to support it by revenues, meaning motor fuel tax and or licensing fees, which are the 2 things being kicked around. So the research, or at least a recommendation in numbers, does this come out of the blue, or did somebody back up this?
My guess is there was probably some negotiation that took place. I do not have information of any study that has been happening.
I love negotiations. Starting from what? What's the base of the negotiations?
Well, I think it's basically $0.
58 bucks sounds good. 60
right.
bucks.
Yeah. No, I don't have an answer for that.
You're just a messenger on it,
yeah,
but that's the problem
sure.
we have in the state. With making changes of laws, especially when it comes to fees, what do you back it up with? And do you find out 2 years later that it was way under or way over whatever number they negotiated? And I think it's critical going forward if they are going to pass a motor fuel tax increase along with fees, that somehow, because everybody's the VMT is not on the conversation right now. So they better come up with something to support the revenue idea for electric or non-gas autos.
And Mr. Chairman, this is a key part of our messaging to the legislators and other leaders. Was a part of Jesse's testimony last week of getting this right and making sure that we don't take the easy path of just shifting to gimmicks to fund transportation, but that there's a real relationship between the revenues that are generated and use of the system.
So the other thing I will say is this is a standalone bill. I don't think that it will advance very much further. I think that Whatever happens in the broader infrastructure discussion will include revenue enhancements and revenues to generate new capital. And so personally, I don't think this bill goes very far.
Yeah, and again, understanding that a capital bill is gonna have to be met with a revenue stream to support it. But again, I say it's been repeated here 3 times now that, you know, people out there, I think they've always realized, but even more so now, the needs for a capital bill for transportation. We have bridges, you know, Will County, for example, the I-80 bridge demonstrates that need out there. And I think more and more conversation, people are getting that. The question is, if you do it, you know, do it right, and certainly tag it to inflation.
Sustainable.
But you short yourself, and nobody's gonna wanna come back for another 30 years and increase gas tax. I just hope they really are doing, the governor and his administration and the legislative body doing their due diligence on what they're gonna need and how they're gonna support it.
So, Mr. Chairman, just as a kind of a associated note with this, we did convene a special meeting of the Council of Mayors to talk about how we do much more collectively, you know, in a unified manner, message the needs and the proper approach. And it is important that, you know, the more we get all of the stakeholders to speak in unison, the stronger that message is. And so this is all a key part of that message that we're trying to get out there.
But I think people also expect some support, not necessarily documentation, but some support of here's what we need, here's what the needs are out there, and here's what, you know, the revenue that's gonna be used to support that. Again, getting back to about the mistrust of people with government is, you throw out a number and now we're gonna negotiate based upon what? You know, based upon, so the more factual information they get out there, the more support I think they'll get from the public in saying, you know, this is the right way to go. Although I still personally believe that I don't think the capital bill is gonna go this year. I just think there's some hesitation on taxation the first year of an administration. That's unfortunate because another year delays means another year of cost rising on the improvements that we need. Hopefully that's not, I'm wrong, but just discussing right now numbers, I don't think they're even near numbers yet.
So can I just ask for approval before I forget?
Chairman,
And then,
I have
and then we can
forgotten,
come
Gordon.
back to
I have
the
forgotten. Any
capital
other comment?
program.
Frank?
Yes.
Good.
On,
Yes.
think we should support it. But in the last paragraph, it says fairer and more predictable investment. True, but it goes on. Typically, is that something?
I think that's CMAP saying that.
Yeah. That's, we don't know. There's
Correct.
no idea.
Right.
The bill is a good bill. We don't know. Crucial bill covers all problems.
Mm-hmm.
Not known, but
Yes.
effective.
But it does provide more information, better information, more timely for them to make the assessments that they need to make.
For everybody.
For everyone, yes.
Problem.
Correct.
Mayor, go ahead.
Yes, I'm,
Sure.
Stormwater Mayor, highly recommend. There is no mechanism out there, and 2 different attorneys' opinions have said, well, maybe it's enforceable, maybe it's not. You know, there are a lot of communities I know in our area up in Lake County that were hit in 2017 with a very devastating flood, and I know Carolyn, McHenry County was hit too. You know, we need this legislation so we can protect our residents, and you know, a lawsuit can tie us up for years trying to do that, so I highly recommend support of that bill.
In fact, the Illinois Municipal League, in their latest bulletin, there's a series of bills that are going to hopefully help support non-home rule communities. They won't go with the change in population. We know that's not going to happen. So hopefully, if they they do it bill by bill or area by area, that'll help us in that home rule. One last question I'm gonna have for RTA is there any type of legislation prepared? I just mentioned that there may not be a capital bill coming out of Springfield. What about, we talked about our own bootstraps with the RTA locally and consideration of additional revenue through that resource.
We have some draft legislation, nothing's been formally filed. The strategy had been to tack on to
Hey, capital.
cap. That's been sort of the game. We've got some other standalone legislation that should help transit limp through, one of which is the short-term borrowing thesis. But we haven't sort of gone to the point of pushing for it in.
And one of the reasons, Mr. Chairman, why kind of folks thought that the TACOM was the best approach was the concern that if the region steps out and moves on its own, that, you know, we could lose out on a capital bill. And so we want to make sure that the state meets its responsibility in doing what it needs to do for the state, and then we're able to do something extra on top of that to meet our specific needs. And so that was just one of the concerns with trying to move standalone.
Yeah, I mean, but in theory, everything's on the table.
Any other final questions?
Chairman, I just have one
Sure.
for Representative Zaleski's bill about autonomous vehicles. I'm just curious for my own education why we don't have a position on that one.
You know what, that bill, I read yesterday that he's pulling a bill off.
Yes, okay. Do we typically take position? I noticed this one, it supersedes home rule authority, and I know the city at any rate has a pretty well-developed reflex that anything that does that they oppose. Is that relevant from a CMAP board perspective? Do we have any? Do we take that into account, or most of the member governments don't really? It's not.
Yeah, if it's one of our specifically sponsored bills, obviously we take ownership to it. There are so many multiple bills that affect local governments and counties, et cetera, that are out there, and at times over the years we've had a voice of support, so to speak, but we try to necessarily stay out of direct legislation when it's outside of our boundaries as to our own authority, other than as a planning agency saying, hey, it's a good idea for the future.
Also with AV, we believe that there should be some federal guidance to cover that, and instead of a piecemeal approach from states or municipalities, localities making their own laws. Dang it.
Yeah, there's a whole lobby out against that, and I think that's why Representative Zelensky pulled that yesterday, because I think he started, once those bills pop, then they hear from the opposition, and I think he pulled it off, said we're not ready for it.
Thanks.
I did entertain a motion to approve the, moved and seconded. Any final questions? If not, all's in favor of supporting the legislation of CMAP? All in favor, signify by a vote of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, vote of no. And
Aye.
And the motion carries. Gordon, thank you.
So I just, back to the capital bill, I don't agree with you on them not doing anything this year, respectfully, Mayor. Because historically, they don't move it until the end of session. I believe they will use it to leverage the overall budget activity. The one thing that kind of frightens me a little bit is the lack of discussion about revenues.
Yeah.
I mean, that hasn't taken place
That was my
at
point
all.
about them not doing
Right.
anything.
Well, but again, that can all be worked out when they do the final deal, in my opinion. So they are the other thing that's a little bit awkward about this year is this is the General Assembly leading the infrastructure discussion. Historically, it's been the department. Well, the department hasn't had anyone in place until last week, I think, or a week before. And now I don't know where they are. And so I think we're having conversations with them next week, Joe?
Yeah, I should have mentioned that in my executive director's report. Monday, I'll be doing a meet and greet with the new secretary, so.
Right.
Yeah, in fact, there was a call, whether we decided to do that call for projects through local cities and villages throughout the state as a wish list of not only horizontal but vertical potential capital projects, and without any doubt and without shock, I mean, there's not a city and village in this state who could use certainly supplemental, even motor fuel tax, let alone assisting us in capital projects. So that's gonna be handed down, and they're gonna get an eyeful of probably billion-plus projects that could be done through local government, especially motor fuel tax. I think Governor Quinn was the last one that came up with that additional amounts through the motor fuel tax formula to give us, some dollars. But yeah, there's a huge need out there. So we're preparing. Yeah, we have our projects being submitted down there, but we'll see how they come up with a revenue stream and seeing with.
Yeah, and so there's a House committee and a Senate committee that are both on parallel tracks, holding infrastructure discussions, and hopefully they'll get around to revenue. But, we will be testifying, and I know the RTA will be testifying at a House hearing tomorrow. And so I do believe that there will be some kind of infrastructure bill that takes place by the end of session.
We'll see.
See my
Not
crystal
that I'm
ball.
against it, but we'll see.
Yeah,
I
that
just-
is my report.
Thank you. Yeah.
And there'll be Senate hearings actually coming up in April too.
Yes.
on the Same topic.
Right.
Question though, is the secretary attending the MPO policy committee meeting so we can kind of, I know you said you've got
Tomorrow,
a private
no.
meeting. Okay,
Tomorrow,
just
no.
looking forward to engaging him, getting him up to speed on what our regional issues are and needs are.
Yeah, I think he's at the House committee tomorrow morning.
Well, the good news is he's an insider, so.
Yeah.
we have an advantage over anybody new coming in to know and understand the process of what's going to take place, so. Any other comments on legislation? Gordon, thank you.
Thank you.
We moved along real quick in this meeting.
Item 10.
Under other business before the board,
So there is an item that we need to report on, out on from the executive session last month.
Sure. I'll recap it real quick. Last board meeting, February 13th, we went into closed session to discuss closed session minutes. During that meeting, the following was approved, and so today what we need to do is announce the approval of these three items in open session. What was approved was the draft minutes from September 12th, November 14th, and January 9th. What was also approved was continued confidentiality of all minutes not previously released for the years of 2006 through 2018. And also the authorization to destroy all recordings after 18 months was approved during that closed minute session. And so today we need to announce that those are approved in open session. So I'm seeking approval from the board.
is there a motion? Second. Any questions? All in favor, signify by a vote of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, vote no, motion carries. Yeah, I wasn't here last month, and that's why.
I know, it is, I will take ownership of that. I had, incorrect
Oh,
knowledge.
you weren't here either.
So we.
That's right, we misled
So
you.
we follow.
Yeah.
Experience
That's
is,
right.
is
Did it
is
legally.
worth a lot.
Yeah, I guess we go vacation more, you can give me more.
Okay, we have moved along very quickly. Meeting's open to the public. Any comments you may have?
Good morning. I just would like to compliment what I saw on the Facebook about the village of Elmwood Park when me and my wife was there about the grade crossing separations. I would like to kudos to them because they finally going to get an underpass after what happened a couple of years ago when on the Grand Avenue crossing in Elmwood Park after they had so many incidents, especially when the cars was on the tracks right there during rush hour and the Metro hit them. So I would like to kudos to the village of Elmwood Park for finally getting an underpass because they definitely need it with all over 20,000 people driving through that area, including Pace Bus 319. Sometimes I take that whenever we go through there because that's what you call a danger waiting to happen. But I'm finally glad that they are finally going to get an underpass because they definitely need it because that is what you call was a walking time bomb waiting to happen. And also too, I'm glad that they're also working out for the airport transit right over there by where they had to shut down by the remote parking lot areas to make sure that they'll get that thing done by next year. So the biggest question is to make sure for the Pace buses, will that be able to move over there from the once it's completely done for the 250 and the 330. And then so people would like to know in advance on where they will get it. So once it's completely done and it's up and running, and then how will the signage be able to help them out to make sure where they'll get it, since we connected right there closer to the Metra O'Hare transfer of the North Central station stop. So just would like to make sure about that. So with people with disabilities in advance, they'll know what is what, so they can get the heads up on it, because when they're coming into town, they would like to know where their connection's gonna be. So they really have no clue, no idea, especially with the hard of hearing and visually impaired. They want to know way in advance because they feel like they're being out of reach and out of touch. So make sure about that so that they can get well prepared, because the disability community want to be well prepared in advance, just like y'all. So don't leave them out of it so they can get the heads up on it.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? So you guys are ready for St. Patrick's Day?
you see that.
Good morning. I want to thank you guys and Elmwood Park for approving to build the underpass, because this is long overdue. Because a lot of people get hit at that railroad crossing. And another thing is that we also need to just have more railroad separations, especially over there at Pulaski and 87th, because that's an extremely dangerous intersection. And at that intersection too, you need to put there no turns, no right turns, no left turns, because it's extremely dangerous. Only due to the fact is the railroad crosses right there in the middle of the intersection. So it's like you cannot really have turns there because people are going to get killed again, like what happened a couple weeks ago. Thank you.
Thank you. The board, other comments, questions? The board will meet next April, and as always on schedule. No other comments or questions. The executive committee will meet immediately afterwards. After this meeting, with that in mind, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. Move to second. All in favor, signify in usual manner. Motion carried. Meeting adjourned. There we go. Back to 1 hour.
Thanks, Mayor Bennett. Happy St. Pat's.
You too. Thank you. Enjoy.
Bye.
I still gotta wait for the 11:35. That's okay, I'm gonna catch the 11:35 instead of 12:35 today, that's great.